You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, delicious friends, and welcome to Who Did What Now, the history podcast that's not your history class, with me, your host, Katie Charlwood, history harlot and reader of books. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of it all, it's been a good weekend for me, actually. I did have a wee case of the doomies today. Like, I've been feeling sort of anxious and had a sense of foreboding, which was not at all pleasant, but it's there, and I'm just kind of dealing with it, I think. But, like, professionally, there's a lot of stuff happening. Anyway, I had another date, and it was really nice. It was really nice. It's all good dates should have movies, followed by watching Olympic badminton. It was a good time. It was a good time. Although I don't understand what the deal is with some of the outfits, because I was watching Ireland v Israel, right, in the singles badminton, and Ireland had clearly an Ireland outfit for sporty outfit, and the Israeli person did not. And then I was looking in the background and I saw that Denmark were again somebody who was wearing the same outfit as Israel, and then I had to go look it up because I couldn't see, and it was the US. The US was doing it, and I was like, what is this? Why don't they have their own badminton outfits, kits? Why don't they have their own kits? Where's their uniform? I don't get it. Shouldn't these countries have their own uniforms? Why are they wearing the same one? What is this? Anyway, professional time. So I've got a couple of gigs coming up. I've got one in Letterkenny, County Donegal. So that's going to be a fun one where I talk about the mysterious disappearance of an archaeologist. Ooh. I've also got a Cork show coming up in September. Newcastle and Edinburgh are in November. And I've got Belfast in December. And there are a few other things that are going to be happening, but I can't talk about them now because I'm embargoed. Also, I don't know if y'all listen to or watch Kinky History with Dr. Esme James, but Dr. Esme, she's doing a book launch in August, on the 27th of August, and it's fab. It's going to be in Hodges and Figgins, and I'm going to be there because, of course, I am. You think my pal, my online pal, my history BFF is going to be flying all the way, into this continent, and I'm not going to see her? Bitch, please. I'ma be there. Yeah. Oh, and vote for me in the Listener's Choice for the British Podcast Awards, just because I think it'd be funny. Now that's out of the way, quit your jibber jabber. In fact, you I will. But first, we've got to get our source on. So our sources are the 1904 Olympic Games Analysis and Summaries by Bill Mallon, The Americanization of the World by W.T. Stead, America's First Olympics, the St. Louis Games of 1904 by George R. Matthews, The Olympic Games 1904 by Charles J.P. Lucas, The Wildest Race Ever by Megan McCarthy, and of course we have articles from Olympedia, History.com, Biography.com, the Smithsonian, and surprisingly, the New York Times. Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then let's begin. So at the time of recording, the Olympics is currently happening in Paris, France. Well, the Summer Olympics at least. And I have had this on my list to talk about for such a long time, but there's been so many things that have either come up or been more important or have been more relevant to the time. And then trying to get all this information together is difficult because you have to read a lot of things and link a lot of stuff together. And I'm going to try and do this in as chronological a fashion as I can, but I'm doing my best. So the Olympics as we know them now, well, now they've been split into summer and winter, but at one point there was just the Olympic Games, and they were trying to get a resurgence going for a while, and they were trying to do it from like the mid-1800s, like 1866, that kind of idea. They were trying to get it going in Britain, but it didn't quite work out. But then by 1896, Pierre de Coubertin brings it back. So there are Olympic Games in 1896 and 1900s, and then in 1904. So in 1903, like, they were trying to find a place to have the Olympics, and they're looking all about the place, and they settle on Chicago. And Chicago was getting ready to do this. It's getting set up. However, there is a man, James E. Sullivan, originally from New York City, but that's an Irish name. But he is now in St. Louis, and he is the fella who helped establish the Amateur Athletic Union, which was sort of invented to establish common standards for amateur sports. Because, like, they weren't regulated. There wasn't a universally agreed upon set of standards, rules, regulations for sports and sporting events. Which, you know, games work better with rules. They just do, because that's how you know you've won. And Sullivan, he's a wee bit of an arsehole, because he basically takes control and takes over, like, all of these other amateur athletic unions, like, all over the US. And he just becomes the guy for it. And did he have opinions? Like, he was really blunt, he was very strict, he did not compromise. But it is working for him in this time period, because in 1892, he is asked to run the American Sports Publishing Company. And so he uses this as a way to push the Amateur Athletics Union, resulting in most national championships falling under the umbrella of the AAU. Now, being a man from the past, he had some very, very strong opinions. One of which was sort of, I'm gonna go with eugenics and supremacy. Yeah, I'm gonna go there. See, he believed that American athletes were just the pinnacle of, I was gonna say the profession, but they're not professional because they're amateurs, which is the point of the Olympics. Like, you have to not be getting paid as a job, like, in this to do it. Like, that's what that is. And he intends to showcase American athletic superiority at the World's Fair. Because, okay, in 1904, the city of St. Louis was going to host an event called the Louisiana Purchase Centennial Exhibition, which just rolls off the tongue, right? So it was celebrating the Louisiana Purchase, which happened in 1803. So it's like 101 years, like, before this. Now, I have personally never organised a centennial exhibition or celebration of any kind, but I would expect that in order to have a centennial celebration/exhibition, it would need to be on that 100-year celebration. Like, it would have to be 100 years later, not 101. Like, if you're going to organise events, maybe just start with the date. Trying to get that right, maybe. Anywho, so this gets sort of mushed together with the World's Fair. And so you've got, like, sort of exhibitions happening, and there's going to be sports and a bunch of other stuff like artwork and theatre things and inventions, like all the stuff you expect to see at the World's Fair. Okay, so this is actually one of the reasons why it was delayed for a year. It was in order to have enough people at it, enough people sort of displaying. So as part of the exhibition, there was going to be like 43 states and 62 countries all in all. And so the whole point is that they would come over and it would be like a big thing, and a bunch of countries had already signed up to this, right? Meanwhile, the Olympics are trying to set up the Olympic Games, And they were sort of looking at US cities and where they were going to have it. And they end up choosing Chicago. And you may be thinking, Katie, why are you talking about St. Louis if they decided that the Olympics was going to be in Chicago? Well, here's the plot twist, my friends. They changed their minds. Basically, Sullivan digs his wee heels in and he says, well, this is supposed to be happening at the same time as this. Well, everybody's going to come to us because we're the big deal. Because at the time as well, there's been 2 Olympics. This is only the 3rd. And people aren't really, into it yet. It hasn't become, a super big deal. And so it gets to the point where the Olympics committee end up changing their mind and choosing St. Louis as where the Olympics is going to happen. So this is what Pierre had to say about the Olympics. This is a quote, by the way. The Olympiad would match the mediocrity of the town of St. Louis. That's it. He's just nope. It's going to be shit, effectively. He says it in a very polite 1900 way. Yeah, it's wild. And so, because of the Amateur Athletic Union, because, it was huge, it was massive, that all of the major players had already agreed to go and be involved in this, track situation. And so, they had no choice. They had no choice. They had to, fucking give in. And so the Olympics has to be held in St. Louis, who, let's be clear, have not done enough preparation for this. They don't have it because Chicago was preparing from, the year before. It was getting, the stadiums and getting it all sorted. St. Louis, we're not doing that. And it's not great. It's not great for people involved. So Pierre is just so annoyed that this is happening, that it's in St. Louis, that he just has nothing to do with it. He just, exits stage left. And so St. Louis are kind of left to their own devices because there's no official way of it yet. There's no set rules. There's no sort of established planning because this is only the 3rd one. And all the stuff that Pierre had planned and was going to do, he didn't write it down, or if he did write it down, he did not share it. And so it was not great for everybody. And so this whole thing between the World's Fair and the exhibitions and the Olympics, it's a 7-month situation. The fair that's happening and sort of all these other little events before the Olympics happen is a whole 7-month period. It's wild. So the fair/exhibition opens in April 30th in 1904. And the opening ceremony is held in May. So, politicians come, there's people having a big speech in stadiums, and the place is packed. Unfortunately, they're not watching the Olympics. They're watching the Missouri High School Track and Field Championships. These people came to see Olympics, but the Olympics haven't started. It was just the ceremony. And then this high school was just doing its little track. So that's the first part of it. And here's the thing. Things are about to get so much worse because also, out of all the countries that wanted to go and were planning to come, St. Louis didn't have great transport routes to it. So for a lot of people who would travel in the Olympics, again, not a big deal, there's not really a lot of drive for them to go there to this difficult city that they don't really know about. It's not a big deal to them. Or it's just too much hassle. And then you've got this. And then you have the fact that the Russo-Japanese War is happening. So for the entirety of the Olympics, there's a war between Russia and Japan. And so because of that, many countries are unable to attend. Meanwhile, the fair is still going on. You've got machinery and quote technology. You've got like all this fun food is happening. You've got Dr. Pepper, candy floss or cotton candy. You've got peanut butter, waffle cones, I'm going to say like sugar puffs, like puffed cereal, sort of Rice Krispies, sugar puffs, like that kind of scenario. Like I'm making like eating movements with my hand to my face, and I'm just like, let me tell you about the foods. Oh, there's a pony, a beautiful pony, beautiful Gem Key. So they would have horses that would do sort of performances. So this horse could count up to 30, and they said the horse could read and write. Now here's the thing, horses don't have opposable thumbs, so I don't know, like, is it supposed to be writing with, like, it can't grip a pencil, is it like writing words with its hoofs? Like, have you trained it to write words? Like, if that horse can read, like, don't hand it Black Beauty, I think it'd be sad. But yeah, it's got a reading horse. I love it so much. Oh no, this would be around about the time they had horses like dive into pools. Yeah, there used to be this movie I remember watching. I think it's based on a true story. I must look it up. There was a girl who was like, she would sit on the back of a horse and the horse would like dive off of like a podium and into like a pool of some kind. And so they would do that, but it made her blind. Like, I think there was something in the water, like too much chlorine or whatever. And so she ends up being a blind horse diver thing. I must look it up. Like, that's a flashback from my childhood. All diving horses aside, I guess it's time to talk about what we're all waiting for, the blatant racism. So they have these exhibitions. I don't know, how do we call them? Like Indigenous exhibitions. And on the 12th and 13th of August, they had these things called Anthropology Days. Effectively, they were human zoos. And the reason they were there was to basically go, ooh, look, savages. Look how more civilized we are. Look how fabulous we are. Look at them. Ooh, look at them and their no shoes. And ooh. So there's basically 3,000 of them all together, and just under half are in these anthropological exhibits which showed them in their natural habitats. So you've got people from the Pacific Islands, you've got them from East and Southeast Asia, the Middle East, South America, Africa, and then of course you have Native Americans and First Peoples, with one of the most popular attractions being the Philippine Village, where people could happily gaze upon Filipinos in their natural habitat. I feel dirty saying that, like, and not in a good way. So they built these sort of habitat environments. So like they made like villages. So you would have, Assyrians, you would have the Turks, you would have Pygmies from Central Africa. I had to think there for a second. And you had, along with Native Americans, you had Geronimo on display. I'm sure that was a great time for everybody involved. So people would just like watch them as they would live there, like to show how far advanced the white man was. I mean, America was now. And the thing is as well, this was all put together by, I shit you not, the Department of Exploitation. That's what it was called. So on top of this as well, they actually had displays from residential schools. You know, the ones where they, took all of the young Native Americans and First Peoples up and forced them to be Christian and cut their hair and have English names and not use their native tongue. Yeah, assimilation, to show how well they assimilated when under the guidance of white people. Yeah. And of course, James E. Sullivan is absolutely living for this because he's made head of the fair's Department of Physical Culture, right? And so he is so into proving, the racial superiority of, what, Anglo-Americans? Is that what you call them? Like, white Americans? And he is so into this, like, because he thinks that they're just better, like, in every way, physically, mentally, education-wise. He just thinks they're just tip-top, perfect, and everyone who's, darker than He-Man is less than. America! Sidebar, there is a little bit of a funny twist to this. So, like, some of the sort of indigenous peoples that were, exhibiting, were on display, they were paid actors. Like, they were showmen, like, this was a gig to them, and they were getting paid. So for some of them, I mean, again, not great because you're still exploited, but slightly better off in a way, I guess, because they're earning it and they weren't just forced into it. Like, the kids from the residential school probably were. And Sullivan wanted them to be involved in the Olympics to do, like, the sporty stuff too, because they were physically capable. Like, was it the Anu of Japan were really good at climbing trees, and he wanted them to be in tree climbing competition because anything can be a sport if you think hard enough. I mean, golf's a sport. Ooh, the golfers are going to come at me. It's all angles, mate. It's just math. Anyway. Ooh. I know people who golf as well, and I'm like, is it a sport? And they're like, fuck off, Katie. But yeah. And so they don't want to do the thing that's free because you're an amateur athlete, so you don't get paid to do the Olympics, to do the sporty stuff. But Sullivan's like, I wanted to show how superior we were to you climbing the trees. And that just doesn't happen. And, like, they think some of the events are just fucking ridiculous and they just don't want to do it. So, like, they don't want to climb trees or water vault, which was a thing, by the way, or water polo. Everyone thought water polo was stupid. And I can't say they're wrong, like, I can't. And so there's that. And then we have the bullfight. The bullfight. So, fun fact, at this point in time, bullfighting was illegal in the USA. Completely illegal. But on June 5th, they decide they're going to have a bullfight in the Olympics. And they're going to do it. So they sell a bunch of tickets. They get them to the stadium. They have their bulls. And the governor orders that anyone involved in bullfighting is to be arrested. Unfortunately, they had already sold 8,000 tickets. And so they decide they're just going to have the bullfight. So the crowd are all in and they're getting agitated and they're ready to see a man kill a bull or a man be bored by a bull. Whom's to say? So they're getting ready for this. And the announcer is like, Don Emanuel Savrera is going to, like, fight the bull. And then a deputy steps out and he's like, no bullfighting today here, bub. And the police just basically stop the show. Naturally, the audience is pissed. They're asking for refunds. They're demanding refunds. And everyone's like, no, just get out. And clearly, they're not happy with this. And the pissed off crowd turns into an angry mob. And they head down into the arena and they release 3 bulls who are skinny as fuck. So these bulls are, like, they're so hungry, they're so weak. They just don't have the energy to be chasing anybody. So it wouldn't have been much of a bullfight, in fairness. So I think they would have been demanding their money back anyway. But, like, there's nothing they can do. There's no excitement here. They can't even, like, turn into an angry mob properly. They're just like, well, this sucks. And what do they do with all that rage? Well, the same thing anybody would do in their situation. Arson. They burn it to the ground. And it burns pretty fast because, a lot of the stadium's made of timber. And timber, I don't know if you've ever been near a big bunch of wood, tends to burn pretty quickly. Science. Oh, I totally forgot to mention, like, this is a full male event. Like, there's no, like, women's sports. Although women are allowed to box. Like, women are allowed to box. But everything else is just for men. Women can be involved as long as they're punching each other in the face, I guess. Speaking of women not getting the respect they deserve, there's this photographer, Jessie Tarbuck-Spiels, and she's from Buffalo. And I think she's one of the first female news photographers like in the US. And so she tries to get in on this, and she tries to register, and the fair officials just like deny her an official press pass at the fair because they were like, you can't move cameras around, you're a lady. And so she goes around, and she does manage to like swing her way like at one point, but not through like any official channels. And the funniest thing as well is like the photos that she takes are like the best of the entire Olympics. Like they're so good. Back to the sports. Okay, so there's a couple of weird things here which are amazing. There's a diving event just called fancy diving. It's basically just doing like acrobats in the air before you hit the water, and it's like who can dive the fanciest. I think a US person wins, and like the German like contests it, and it ends up being overturned like, I don't know, several years later, but America's like, that never happened. So yeah, then we have gymnastics. So in July, the first like gymnastic events start taking place, and there's George Iser, who is part of a gymnastics club in St. Louis. Now, George, unlike every other gymnast there, has a wooden leg. He's got a peg leg. He's and yet he's in the Olympics. And this may shock you, but he did come last in the triathlon. Yeah, the long jump wasn't for him. Wasn't for him. So for the anthropology days, right, when they had sort of the indigenous people from all the countries doing the sports, they had flown like a bunch of scientists in to observe them, basically just trying to reinforce this concept of the white person's superiority, right? And for a lot of the sports, they did not explain to them how to do the sport, so it might not be native to their region or country. So like hurdles, shot put, the long jump, like they weren't told. There was like 100-yard dash, but they didn't tell them they were doing a 100-yard dash. And when the starting pistol went off, like they didn't know what they were doing. Nobody considered that maybe them all speaking different languages and no one conveying the rules to them would be useful. But like, that's another one for another day. Now Sullivan, he is absolutely loving this, because this is just solidifying his idea that American athletes are just superior. I don't know, maybe give people time to train, show them what they're doing maybe, like give them more than 5 minutes. They'd kick your ass, buddy. But yes, back to the Olympics, which is in sort of August to September, right? The Olympics, yeah, there's 12 countries, because remember the whole war situation, coupled with the fact that people didn't want to go to St. Louis because they didn't know where it was and how far away it was. Yeah, so the majority of the athletes are from the US, to the point that like a lot of the events would just have different Americans competing against each other. Like the tug of war, which yes, was an Olympic sport. Like they're just like America against America. Oh no, I forgot archery. Women could do archery. So they could shoot you or punch you in the face. Like that's the only stuff they could do at the Olympics. Fuck. It's fine. Anyway, so nothing's really going well for any athletes. There's this guy from Germany, Johannes Rung, and he is supposed to be running the 800 meters, right? Unfortunately, this place is so poorly run that the day before he lines up in the wrong race, which is like a 400-meter race. And he's so tired from doing this that when he actually does like his actual race the next day, he's too fucking tired because he's an 800-meter runner. And he ends up coming in 5th. I've already mentioned fancy diving, but also like all of the swimming stuff, they happened in like rivers and lakes. There was one man-made lake that was for the 50-yard freestyle race. And so Zoltán Halmaj of Hungary, he was like the favourite to win. And he wins the race by a foot, but the US judge is basically like, no, the American totally won. Like, and the Hungarian is like, what the fuck? And so a brawl starts, like fisticuffs, and it gets so bad they're just like, just swim again. And they swim again, and like Zoltan, he beats him by like a stroke, like it's so neck and neck, but he wins again, and they're like, fuck. Now, if you think swimming brawls were bad, let me tell you about the fisticuffs false identity. Like, there's identity theft happening in the Olympics. So this boxer, lightweight boxer, Carl Burton, he's pretty popular. He's very popular in the area, and he wins his first match. And then they're like, wait a minute. Somebody's like, that's not Carl Burton. He's actually this other dude called James Bollinger. He's just like, I'll pretend to be him. Nobody will notice that I'm not this very popular boxer from this very specific area. Naturally, he's disqualified. So then the person who he was supposed to go up against, Peter Sturholt, ends up being beaten by Jack Egan. So Jack Egan ends up with the silver medal, and Sturholt is like, fourth, whatever, sucks. But as it turns out, Jack Egan was not Jack Egan. He was Frank Floyd, who decided to pretend to be Jack Egan for reasons. So yeah, that means that Sturholt ends up getting the bronze, even though he's never actually won a fight, just because two guys decided to like identity theft it up in there. Olympics imposter era. Da 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 da. There are so many like great sort of fiction books like I could imagine from this scenario. Like, I've got so many ideas. The best starting points are history, right? Yeah. So you've got that, which is bad enough for your international competition. But of course, we have the worst part of this entire event, which is the 1904 marathon, which we're going to get to after a word from our sponsors. And we are back. So the 1904 marathon is wild. It is absolute madness. So the marathon is actually like the big event of the Olympics, and it's one of the few sort of one of the few events that actually sort of link back to like Greece. So because you would have marathon, you would have like wrestling, like these were all very traditional, sports. However, this is not going to be honouring that memory, I don't think. Well, apart from possible death. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So there are quite a few favourites for this race. You've got Tom Hicks, John Lorden, Michael Spring, A.L. Newton, Sam Miller. And this bunch of lads, they're used to running marathons. Like, this is their jam. Yeah. That being said, it's not just people who are used to running marathons that get involved in this race. There's a bricklayer who landed a place in the marathon because he won a 5-mile race. Fred Lors. Now, those are known as sort of the more legitimate of the people involved in the marathon. So you've also got 10 Greeks who had never run a marathon. They just thought this would be fun. And for Cuba, there's an ex-mailman called Felix Carbajal. So he had basically ran up and down Cuba, raised a bunch of money to send him there, but he gets to New Orleans and just gambles all the money away. And so he has to hitch a ride like to St. Louis in order for him to actually compete. And then we have the first Black Africans ever to be involved in the Olympics, and they are 2 members of the Tswana tribe from South Africa who were part of the Boer War exhibition. So these two guys had actually served as messengers during the Boer War. And so they would have to like run quite a bit to actually pass the message on and deliver information. And so they were like, they can totally do a marathon. And then on top of that, there are like a couple of students who end up joining the race because it looked fun. So yeah, they're all set up. They're going to run the marathon. It is 40 kilometres or 24.85 miles. And on August the 30th, 1904, they all line up on this dusty road. It's not paved, it's not prepared, and it's not cordoned off. So like, it's hot. So 90 Fahrenheit, 32 Celsius. That's right, isn't it? I don't know Fahrenheit, so hopefully that's right. So yeah, it's so dusty, it's so hot, and the dust is like so thick, like inches thick. And the stones are all cracked, and it's not safe to actually walk on, and yet they're going to go run on it. That's fine. So the runners, they're all set up at the starting line. Felix, the Cuban mailman, is in a long-sleeved shirt. It's white. He's wearing his like suit trousers. They're like dress trousers. A beret and a pair of street shoes. See, he had gambled all his stuff, so he didn't even have gear to wear to the race. But like, he manages to get a pair of scissors and like cut his trousers up so that they're turned into shorts. Because he's like, I'ma make this work. So the starting pistol goes off, 3:30, boom, boom, off they go. Now, as they start running, they immediately encounter a problem. That problem is traffic. Because there's like trucks, you've got automobiles, because nobody thought, let's maybe block off the road to make sure that our athletes, aren't victims of vehicular manslaughter. Like, maybe let's not do that. It didn't come up. Speaking of cars, coaches would get in a car and like drive alongside the runners, just like, keep going, buddy, you got this, like, no pain, no gain. But unfortunately, because they're driving along this very dusty dirt road, like, the dust is going up in the air. And yeah, these guys are running on what one fair official called the most difficult a human being was ever asked to run over. And it's not flat. There are 7 hills. So they're like from like 300 feet to 100 feet. Like there's some graphing going on. You're going up and down. And to add insult to injury, there was only one point where any of the athletes could actually get a drink of fresh water. And it is 12 miles from the start of the race. So at that point, that's where you could get water, not before and not after. That being said, Felix, the Cuban mailman, managed to get a drink at a water tower 6 miles in. Like, he's just lucky. Because Sullivan, here's the thing, him and the other officials, they wanted to test the effects of purposeful dehydration. Because this is the perfect time to do it on these people who did not consent. But yeah, they couldn't drink water, but they were allowed to have a moist sponge like pressed inside their mouth. Like, it seems like an easy thing to do when you're running. Let's maneuver the sponge into his mouth. Like, okay, that's not a choking hazard. Speaking of choking, when he is just 8 miles shy of the finish, Californian William Garcia collapses on the side of the road from the dust, and he is rushed to hospital. So, as it turns out, the dust from the road had coated his esophagus, ripped his stomach lining, and caused serious hemorrhaging. And they're like, if he had been left, like, if this was 1 hour later, this man would be dead. Like, he was so close to being, like, the first fatality in this. Like, so close. The next to leave the race was John Lorton. He was inhaling so much dust it caused him to vomit, and he was just like, fuck this for a game of soldiers, I'm out. Nope. And off he goes. Then Len Tao, one from the Tswana tribe, he ends up being chased off course by a pack of wild dogs. And these chased for like a mile before the dogs give up. Like, they keep going. And after they do that, he turns around and just joins the race again. Then, of course, we have the Cuban mailman, who I just can't be mad at, right? Felix Carvajal. He's like just trotting along because he keeps pausing to chat to spectators. He's got broken English, but he's like stopping, having a chat, just living his best life. Now, at one point, he's like going past a car, and like everyone in the car is like eating peaches, and he's like, "Bows, give me a wee peach though. Can I have a peach? Wee peach." And everyone in the car is like, "No, you can't have a peach." And he's like, grabs two and just like starts eating them as he ran, because he hadn't eaten. Like, he had no money, he'd hitched in, so he hadn't eaten like 2 days prior to the marathon. Like, he'd just been starving. And so he's a hungry boy, and so he's eating these peaches. And then, as he keeps running along, he comes across an apple orchard and decides to eat fruit from the ground. Now, he must have just been hungry, because he didn't realise there was something wrong with these apples, because they were rotten. He ends up getting these terrible stomach cramps, and so he's like lying down, he's curled up in the fetal position, and then he falls asleep. He takes a nap. Now, here's the thing. They say that these apples are rotten. Now, we don't know exactly what kind of apples these are. These could be crab apples. These could be more difficult to digest. They just could be awkward, especially if you're eating that much fibre, like all at once, and you haven't eaten in several days. Like, that's not good for you. Like, that's going to create a situation. But Felix isn't the only one to have cramps in this race. Sam Mellor, who's like in the lead, he starts getting these really, really bad cramps, and he slows down from a run to a jog to a walk, and eventually he just stops. He's like, I'm done. He just sits down. Like, he is properly done. Another runner to get stomach cramps was Lors, who's like in 4th place. And so he gives up, and there's like a car going past, and he's like, "Hey, you want to give me a lift?" And he jumps in. And so as he's driving along the route, like, he's waving at runners, he's waving at spectators, and he's just going. All the while, Hicks, he's still in the lead. It's around about the 10-mile mark, and he is begging for some fluids. He's like, "Get that liquid in me, boys." And they're just like, "Oh, we can't give you a drink." And so they're like sponging. Sponging the water into the mouth. This is just as good. And not at all creepy. That being said, Hicks's crew, his coaches and doctors and whatnot, they decide that around about the 17-mile mark that he needs a special concoction, a little health drink. You know how you got your protein shakes or your I don't know, superfruit smoothie? He had his own special drink. A creative little cocktail made of egg whites and strychnine. For those of you who know anything about poisons, yeah, rat poison. They gave him rat poison. That being said, strychnine does have some benefits. Like, that's what a lot of these poisons do. Like, if you take a little bit, and like, it helps. It's like medicine. You take one medicine, good. You take 50 medicine, bad. But yeah, this strychnine, a teeny weeny bit of poison. Teeny weeny bit of poison on the dusty road, and the inhaling, and the lack of moisture. Like, this is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Because, see, strychnine is a stimulant. It stimulates the nervous system. And so they would take it in small doses. That's right, they're microdosing poison. And of course, this is the early 1900s. Everybody's on drugs. They're on laudanum and morphine and strychnine, apparently. So he's downed his poison, and he is just like jogging along. And Lors, who was in the car, that car that he got a lift in breaks down at the 21-mile mark. And so he hops out and just starts running again because his cramps have gone away. Yay for him, because he wasn't outside inhaling the dust. And so he overtakes Hicks, whose team's just like, buddy, what you doing? Get off the track. And he's like, no. And he just keeps going. And so he gets there and he is the first runner through the stadium. He crosses the finish line like just under 3 hours. And everyone is chanting. They're like, yeah, America, American won. And Alice Roosevelt's there and she's ready to put the wreath over his head. She's like, you've done America proud. You're amazing. And just movie moment as he's bent over in that sort of half bow and she's about to put it over his head like beautiful Jim Kay the horse after winning the Grand National. I don't know, I'm grasping at straws here for horse related wreaths. The Olympic official, one of the officials was like, hey, hang on a second, this isn't right. He realizes that Lors isn't the winner. And Lors is just like, well, I didn't actually say that I won the race. And he was like, it's a big joke. And so the whole crowd just turns on him. They're just like, boo, we hate you, you suck. And he's like, it's funny, sorry. But yeah, naturally, he's disqualified. And Hicks is back in the lead. But he is not doing well because, he has consumed poison. His skin's all ashy. He's limping. He is struggling to get by. And he's at the point where he thinks he's in second place. So he's just like, just keep trucking, just keep trucking. He's like, chug, 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 a chug. And he's just kind of steadily going along. And then he hears that Lors is being disqualified. And so he's like, go, gadget legs. And off he goes. And so he's really going hell for leather. And in order to help support him, his team give him more egg whites and strychnine, just more poison. And then they just chuck water on him, like an ice bucket challenge, but not cold. They're just psh. And he is just going. And I mean, he is suffering with the effects of poisoning. He's just had water thrown on him. He's been inhaling dust. And he's barely going. And a race official literally writes, over the last 2 miles of the road, Hicks was running mechanically, like a well-oiled piece of machinery. His eyes were dull, lustrous. The ashen colour of his face and skin had deepened. His arms appeared as weights were tied down. He could scarcely lift his legs while his knees were stiff. Which is bad enough, because then he starts hallucinating. He's tripping balls. And he's convinced himself that he's got another 20 miles to run. And he's like, give me some food. Can I have something to eat? Let me lie down. And they're like, no, keep running, bitch. And so he comes up to these 2 wee hills just before the stadium. And he's like, oh no. Oh no. He's he walks up one, he jogs down the other. And when he gets to the stadium, he just can't run anymore. He's kind of trudging. He just can't make it. His body isn't moving. One of the things they do as well, before he gets into the stadium, is they offer him tea, and he's like, no, and so they give him brandy instead, because that's what's going to help the poison, booze. So he's trying to go in, and then his little crew, they put their arms around him and Weekend at Bernie's him, so that his legs are moving. And so they're just trying to get him across the finish line. And it gets to the point that a lot of the spectators are like, we just want a winner at this point. It's fine. We don't care if he's you're putting a Jim Henson situation and puppeteering him across the line, because at this point, it'll do. So Hicks, is declared the winner as at 3 hours, 28 minutes and 53 seconds, which is, as far as I know, the longest official finishing time, in an Olympic marathon, of all time, to this day. And like, and it's actually a good thing they gave him brandy, you know, because if they gave him like any more strychnine, like they would have just killed him. He would have just died. And then it would have been a weekend at Bernie's thing. They'd been like shuffling his corpse over the line, probably. So out of all the people that were involved in the marathon, of all 32 people who were like officially you're contending, 18 of them did not finish. That's more than half. That's more than half of them did not finish. What was it now? The Cuban mailman, he comes in fourth. This is the man who's in like a suit-ish outfit, has taken a nap and still manages to come in fourth. Len Tao, who was chased by wild dogs for a mile off course, he comes in ninth. I am going to end this on a happy note though. So remember our one-legged gymnast friend, George Iser, and how he hadn't done well in like the triathlon and such? Well, it's a good thing he's actually a gymnast, because when he's in the second gymnastics competition on October 29th, so like the day before the marathon, he wins 6 medals in one day. 3 gold for the parallel bars, the 25-foot rope climbing, and the long horse vault. And this was a time where the horse vault didn't have a springboard, like he had to propel himself over. And he did that with a wooden leg. Okay, so he gets 2 silver medals for the pommel horse and 4 event all round, and he gets 1 bronze for the horizontal bar. And up until 2008, George Iser was the only person to have competed in the Olympic Games with an artificial leg. And so ends our tale of the absolute shit show that was the 1904 Olympics. If you liked my retelling of this tale, feel free to rate and review 5 stars. Because I forgot to say at the beginning, right? I got a 3-star review this week, and it was to do with Queen Margot, because I said the people that she was romantically involved with were creepy because they were so much older than her, and their whole argument was like, she doesn't understand the context of the time, which I actually really, really do. I do understand the context of the time, and at no point was this like seen as a really acceptable thing. Like, these marriages happened like for alliance sake, not because anybody thought this was proper or normal. Like, no, this was not a thing. Anyway, that being said, give me 5 stars because screw them. And yeah, you can follow me on the socials. I'm on all of them. Whether I'm that active, because I'm working on the book right now, not as active, but I'm working on it. And alas, it is recommendation time. For reading, I'm going to recommend An African History of Africa from Zainab Badawi. For watching, of course, I'm going to recommend The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And for listening, I'm going to go off base with this one a little bit and recommend an audiobook, Hot and Sour Suspects, a Noodle Shop Mystery by Vivian Chen. And with that, delicious friends, I shall bid you good night. Adios, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, my friends. Bye-bye.